The ballroom smelled of wax, roses, and lies. Not the harmless kind. The dangerous kind wealthy people carried beneath silk gloves and jeweled collars. Lady Eleanor Vale knew that smell well. It drifted through every palace corridor in England. It lived in polite smiles, in soft applause, in arranged marriages. And tonight it clung to the royal ballroom so heavily she could barely breathe. At the far end of the hall, violins played beneath crystal chandeliers while dukes and duchesses danced like painted ghosts. Gold light shimmered across polished marble floors. Servants moved quietly between nobles carrying silver trays and untouched wine. No one noticed Eleanor standing near the western pillar. No one ever did, which was precisely how the Duke of Blackthorn preferred it. "You will not speak unless spoken to," his steward had warned her earlier that evening. Eleanor remembered the exact tone. Cold, sharp, practiced. "As His Grace's archivist, your purpose is to organize documents, not attract attention. Attract attention." She almost laughed thinking about it now. No woman wearing a plain gray gown among peacocks dressed in diamonds could possibly attract attention. And yet, someone was watching her. She felt it. That unsettling instinct women learned long before adulthood. The awareness that eyes had settled onto them with intention. Eleanor slowly lifted her gaze. Across the ballroom, the king was staring directly at her. Her pulse stopped. King Aldrich III was not a man known for warmth. He ruled with the kind of intelligence that frightened people more than rage ever could. Courtiers whispered that he could uncover a lie simply by listening to someone breathe. And right now he was studying Eleanor Vale like she was a page he intended to read carefully. Beside him stood the Duke of Blackthorn, Lucian Ashcombe, the most feared nobleman in the kingdom. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, and emotionally unreachable in the way powerful men often became after years of betrayal. Women adored him, men envied him, servants feared him. And Eleanor had spent 11 months working under his roof without once understanding what kind of man he truly was. Some days he was cold enough to freeze a room. Other days she would catch him doing strange things no cruel man would ever do. Paying a dead servant's debts anonymously. Leaving food outside a stable boy's quarters during winter. Standing alone in the palace chapel long after midnight. He was either deeply kind or deeply broken. Maybe both. The king leaned toward him and murmured something. Lucian's expression darkened instantly. Then, to Eleanor's horror, the Duke turned and looked directly at her. Not through her, at her. Like she had suddenly become a problem. A terrible silence seemed to pass invisibly between the three of them across the ballroom. Then the king smiled, and Eleanor's stomach dropped. Because powerful men only smiled like that when they were about to ruin someone's life. If you enjoy standing motionless like a frightened deer, at least attempt to appear graceful. Eleanor nearly jumped. Lady Beatrice Hawthorne swept beside her in crimson silk, diamonds glittering at her throat. Beautiful, cruel, and dangerously observant, Lucien's former fiancée. Though officially the engagement had ended months ago, unofficially, no one believed Lady Beatrice had accepted that ending gracefully. "You're pale?" Beatrice noted casually, sipping wine. "Has someone finally noticed the invisible little archivist?" Eleanor forced composure. "I prefer invisibility." "Yes," Beatrice replied softly. "That's why men find you interesting." Before Eleanor could answer, movement rippled through the ballroom. The king was approaching. Conversation died instantly. Even the musicians faltered. Eleanor's heart hammered so violently she thought people might hear it. King Aldrich stopped before her. The entire ballroom froze. "My lady," he said calmly. "Not girl, not servant, not archivist. My lady." Every noble nearby noticed. Eleanor bowed carefully. "Your Majesty." The king studied her face for a long moment. "You work for Blackthorn." "Yes, Your Majesty." "And how long have you served him?" "Nearly a year." A difficult man, a dangerous question. Eleanor chose honesty carefully. "He is precise." A few nearby nobles hid smiles. Even the king looked amused. "Precise," Aldrich repeated. An elegant way of describing a man people compare to winter storms. Lucien stepped beside the king then, voice low and controlled. "Your Majesty." Eleanor glanced up. God, he looked furious. Not outwardly. Lucian Ashcombe never lost control publicly, but his jaw had tightened slightly, and in aristocratic circles that was equivalent to shouting. The king ignored him. Instead, he extended his hand toward Eleanor. "Dance with me," the ballroom collectively inhaled. Eleanor stared in shock. "No one refuses the king," Beatrice whispered behind her with poisonous delight. Lucian spoke immediately. "She is not trained for court presentation." The king's eyes flicked toward him. "Is that concern I hear from Blackthorn?" "It is practicality." That tiny sound from the king carried amusement sharp enough to cut glass. Eleanor placed her trembling hand in the king's, and the entire ballroom exploded into whispers. As they moved across the floor, Eleanor became painfully aware that every noble in England was staring at her. "You're terrified." the king observed quietly. Yes, your majesty. Good. Only fools feel comfortable around power. His honesty startled her. You know why they fear me, he asked. Eleanor hesitated. Because you see too much. The king smiled slightly. Interesting answer. They turned slowly beneath chandeliers. You care for Blackthorn. It wasn't a question. Eleanor nearly stumbled. No, your majesty. A lie, her throat tightened. I respect him. And he? She looked away. The king noticed. Of course he noticed. Ah, he murmured softly. That single sound carried terrifying understanding. You know, Aldrich said, England has survived many wars, but kingdoms rarely collapse from armies. Eleanor listened carefully. They collapse, the king continued, because powerful men become emotionally weak at the wrong moment. His gaze shifted briefly toward Lucien. And Lucien Ashcombe has recently become very weak. Eleanor's chest tightened uneasily. I don't understand. You will. The music slowed, then stopped. The king released her hand and turned toward the ballroom, toward everyone. And suddenly Eleanor understood something horrible. This had not been a dance. It had been a performance, a setup. The king raised his voice. Tomorrow evening, he announced, the Duke of Blackthorn will attend private royal council regarding succession and inheritance matters. Murmurs spread instantly. Inheritance? Succession? Why publicly announce that? Then the king added calmly, and Lady Eleanor Vale will attend beside him. Silence, absolute silence. Lucien went still. Beatrice's face drained of color. Eleanor felt her heartbeat collapse inside her chest. The king turned slightly toward Lucien. You may consider this encouragement. Then he walked away, leaving destruction behind him like smoke after fire. What did you do? Lucien's voice was low enough only Eleanor could hear as he pulled her into an empty corridor moments later. She stared at him, shaken. Nothing. You spoke to the king before tonight? No. Then why you? I don't know. For the first time since she'd met him, Lucien looked genuinely unsettled. Not angry, unsettled. And somehow that frightened her more. Torchlight flickered across stone walls between them. You should leave London, he said suddenly. Eleanor blinked. What? Tonight? What are you talking about? This is no longer safe. Her fear sharpened. Why? Lucien looked toward the ballroom entrance before lowering his voice. Because the king only interferes personally when he intends to force change. And what change could possibly involve me? He said nothing, which became answer enough. Eleanor stepped backward slowly. No. Lucien's eyes darkened. No? You're hiding something. I'm protecting you. From what? His silence again. God, she hated silence from powerful men. Because silence usually meant the truth was worse than imagination. You should go, he repeated quietly. But before Eleanor could answer, a voice interrupted behind them. Oh, this is becoming scandalous. Lady Beatrice stood at the corridor entrance smiling like a blade. How touching, she continued. The Duke suddenly concerned for his little archivist. Lucien's expression hardened instantly. Leave. Beatrice ignored him. Instead, she looked directly at Eleanor. You truly don't know, do you? Eleanor's pulse quickened. Know what? Beatrice smiled slowly. The king is dying. Everything stopped, even the air. Lucien moved immediately. That is enough. But Beatrice continued anyway. And without legitimate heirs, she said softly, the throne becomes vulnerable. Alliances become necessary. Marriages become political weapons. Eleanor stared at Lucien, horrified. No, Beatrice's eyes glittered. The king believes Blackthorn is loyal enough to stabilize England. Then came the final blow. But only if he marries. Eleanor felt cold all over. Lucien stepped closer protectively. Beatrice. But his former fiancée laughed bitterly. No, let her hear it. Her gaze cut toward Eleanor. You think the king noticed you because you're special? Cruel smile. He noticed because Lucien Ashcombe has spent 11 months looking at you like a starving man pretending not to hunger. Eleanor's breath caught. Lucien went perfectly still. And in that terrible silence, no one denied it. Rain hammered against the palace windows like fists from heaven. By dawn, all of London knew something terrible had happened. Servants whispered it in kitchens. Merchants murmured it through crowded streets. Nobles exchanged careful glances behind gloved hands. The king had summoned the Duke of Blackthorn to private council at sunrise. And whenever King Aldrich summoned a man before breakfast, lives changed. Sometimes kingdoms did too. Eleanor barely slept. She sat near the small fireplace in her chamber at Blackthorn Manor, still wearing yesterday's gown, hands wrapped tightly around untouched tea. The words refused to leave her mind. The king is dying. Mary, political weapon, and worst of all, Lucien Ashcombe has spent 11 months looking at you like a starving man pretending not to hunger. She hated that those words affected her, because once a woman noticed a man looking at her differently, everything changed. Every silence became loaded. Every glance lingered too long. Every accidental touch burned. Eleanor rose suddenly and crossed toward the rain-covered window. London blurred beneath storm clouds. She tried convincing herself this would disappear. Kings made strange decisions constantly. Perhaps this was temporary. Perhaps the king merely intended to frighten Lucienne into choosing a bride. Surely no ruler would force a duke into marriage with a woman who possessed neither fortune nor title. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Before she answered, the door opened. Lucienne entered, still wearing black, still devastatingly composed. But something was wrong. His face looked sharper somehow, like exhaustion had carved itself into his bones overnight. "You locked your door," he observed quietly. "You walked in anyway. It's my house. Then perhaps your servants should stop pretending locks exist." For the first time that morning, the corner of his mouth nearly moved, almost a smile. Almost. But it vanished quickly. "Pack what you need," he said. Her stomach tightened. "For what?" "We leave for Blackthorn Estate within the hour." "What happened at council?" Silence. Eleanor folded her arms immediately. "No," Lucian blinked once. "No? You will stop speaking to me like I'm furniture being relocated." A dangerous statement. Most women in aristocratic society would never speak to a duke that way. But Eleanor had spent too long surviving men with power to fear titles anymore. His gaze sharpened slightly. "You wish honesty? Yes, fine." He stepped closer. "The king gave me 3 days to announce an engagement." The room went cold. Eleanor swallowed hard. And if I refuse, Parliament will challenge my inheritance rights over Blackthorn shipping territories." She stared at him. That wasn't punishment. That was annihilation. The Ashcombe family controlled nearly a third of England's northern trade routes. Remove that power, and half the Duke's influence disappeared overnight. The king would destroy you over marriage. The king would destroy anyone if he believed England required it. Rain thundered outside. Eleanor looked away first. Then marry Lady Beatrice. The moment she said it, something changed in Lucian's face. Not anger, something worse. Disappointment. "I ended that engagement for a reason. She's still noble, wealthy, connected. She is also cruel." The bluntness surprised her. "You once intended to marry her. I once intended to survive her." That answer landed heavier than expected. Lucian walked toward the fireplace slowly. "You think noble marriages are romantic? No, they are transactions, alliances, strategic breeding arrangements wrapped in expensive silk." Eleanor hated how tired he sounded saying it. Not bitter, tired, like a man who stopped believing in love years ago. "You still have options," she said softly. "No." He turned toward her fully now. "That is the problem." And suddenly she understood. The king hadn't merely ordered marriage. He had chosen the bride already. Her pulse began to race. "No." Lucienne said nothing again. That terrible silence. "No," Eleanor repeated. "Absolutely not. The decision is not entirely ours. I'm a common archivist. You are the daughter of General Vale." She froze. Very few people mentioned her father. Mostly because England preferred forgetting disgraced heroes. General Thomas Vale had once been celebrated across the kingdom, before exposing corruption among royal military suppliers. 3 months later, he died under mysterious circumstances. Officially, illness. Unofficially, most believe powerful men silenced him. After his death, Eleanor lost everything: status, protection, inheritance, safety. "Your father was respected by the lower provinces," Lucienne continued carefully. "The people still remember him. They remember scandal, they remember integrity." Their eyes locked, and Eleanor suddenly realized something horrifying. This wasn't about romance. This was politics. The king wanted stability. Lucienne represented aristocratic power. Eleanor represented public trust. Together, they looked like unity, the perfect lie. "You cannot seriously consider this," she whispered. Lucienne held her gaze. "I consider every threat seriously." Before she could answer, another knock echoed downstairs. Then shouting, angry shouting. Both turned immediately. A servant burst into the doorway moments later, pale with panic. "Your Grace." "What happened?" "The newspapers." The servant looked terrified. "They printed it." By noon, London had become vicious. Stacks of fresh newspapers covered every street corner. Every headline screamed the same thing. "The king mysterious favorite who is Eleanor Vale? Blackthorn's secret affair? Is the Duke being forced to marry?" Eleanor stared in horror as carriage drivers openly read scandal sheets outside the manor gates. Women whispered while staring at her carriage windows. Men smirked knowingly. And somewhere in the city, publishers were making fortunes, destroying her reputation. "This is deliberate," Eleanor said quietly. Lucian stood beside the library desk reading another article. "Yes. The king leaked this? Not directly, but intentionally, yes." Her chest tightened painfully. "He's trapping us." Lucian folded the paper slowly. "He's removing alternatives. A horrifyingly effective strategy. No noble family would now risk offering their daughters to Lucian publicly. Not after rumors connected him emotionally to another woman. And Eleanor, her reputation was already collapsing. If the Duke rejected her now, society would devour her alive. She suddenly understood the cruelty of royal politics. The king hadn't forced marriage through law. He'd forced it through public perception. A soft knock interrupted them. Then Mrs. Whitmore entered. The elderly housekeeper had served Blackthorn Manor longer than Lucien himself. She looked between them carefully before speaking. "Lady Beatrice is here." Lucien closed his eyes briefly. Of course she was. Send her away. She insists she has information regarding the newspapers. That changed things. "Fine," he muttered. "Library." Mrs. Whitmore nodded and disappeared. Eleanor moved immediately. "I should leave." "No, this concerns your engagement. It concerns you more." Before she could argue further, Beatrice entered, and immediately smiled upon seeing Eleanor still present. "How lovely," she said sweetly. "The future Duke and Duchess already hiding together." "Say what you came to say," Lucien replied coldly. Beatrice circled slowly through the library. Elegant, poised, dangerous. "You're losing control of the narrative." Lucien's expression didn't change. "Am I?" "Yes." She picked up one of the newspapers casually. "People love tragic romance, especially involving powerful men." Her eyes shifted toward Eleanor, the poor forgotten daughter. "The cold Duke secretly in love with her for months." "That isn't true," Eleanor snapped. Beatrice laughed softly. "Oh, darling." Truth stopped mattering the moment emotion became involved. That line hit disturbingly hard. Because she was right. Modern audiences, whether kingdoms or real people today, rarely cared about facts first. They cared about emotional stories. Scandal, heartbreak, forbidden affection. The same reason ordinary people obsess over celebrity betrayals, royal family drama, billionaire divorces, and public humiliations even now. Humans hadn't changed, only the clothing had. Beatrice set the newspaper down carefully. The public already chose their heroine. Eleanor hated the next question before asking it. "Why are you helping us?" Beatrice looked toward Lucien, and for the first time, something genuinely wounded flickered across her face. "Because despite everything," she said quietly, "I do not wish to watch him destroyed." The honesty stunned the room. Lucien's voice softened slightly. "Beatrice." "No," she interrupted. "You were never cruel to me, only emotionally absent." Pain flashed behind her eyes briefly, then vanished beneath elegance again. "The king believes marriage will stabilize you," she continued. "But he's miscalculated something." "What?" Eleanor asked carefully. Beatrice looked directly at her. "You actually matter to him." Silence. Lucien looked away instantly, and that tiny movement confirmed everything. Eleanor felt heat rise into her chest. No, this was dangerous. Because power mixed with genuine emotion never ended safely, especially for women. Beatrice stepped closer to Eleanor now. "Listen carefully. The moment you marry a powerful man, society stops viewing you as human." Her tone carried experience. "They will measure your worth daily, your beauty, your fertility, your obedience, your usefulness." Eleanor saw it then. Beneath Beatrice's cruelty lived exhaustion, the exhaustion of a woman raised to survive inside aristocracy. "You still have time," Beatrice whispered. "Run before the crown closes around your throat." Then she left, leaving silence behind. Long silence, the kind that changes lives. Eleanor finally looked toward Lucien. "You should marry someone else." "No, you barely know me. I know enough. That's not a reason for marriage." His eyes held hers steadily now. "No," he agreed quietly. "It's the reason I refused every other woman." Her breath caught violently. God, that was not rehearsed, not polished, not manipulative. It sounded terrifyingly real. And somehow that frightened her more than the king ever could. Hours later, the storm worsened. Blackthorn Manor sat wrapped in darkness and rain while servants quietly prepared for departure north. Eleanor stood alone beneath the grand staircase trying to think clearly. But every thought returned to Lucien, the way he looked at her, the way he protected her, the unbearable sadness behind his composure. Then a voice emerged from the shadows. "You truly have no idea what men become when they love something." Eleanor turned sharply. Mrs. Whitmore stood nearby holding folded linens. "You startled me." The older woman smiled faintly. "I raised his grace after his mother died." Eleanor blinked. "You did?" "He was 14, angry at the world. Wouldn't speak for weeks." Her expression softened with memory. "Then one winter morning I found him outside carrying an injured fox through snow because he refused to let it die alone." Eleanor listened quietly. "People think cold men feel nothing, Mrs. Whitmore continued. "Usually it means they feel everything too deeply." That line settled directly into Eleanor's chest. Before she could answer, the manor doors suddenly burst open. A guard rushed inside, soaked with rain. "Your Grace!" Lucien emerged instantly from the corridor above. "What happened?" The guard looked shaken. "There's been an attack. Everything stopped." "Where?" Lucien demanded. "The southern bridge road." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "That's the route my carriage was meant to take tonight." The guard nodded grimly. "Yes, my lady, someone had expected her to flee, and someone had prepared for it." Lucien descended the staircase slowly. But the fury in his eyes now looked lethal, not aristocratic irritation, not political frustration, real fury, the kind powerful men buried carefully until someone threatened the person they loved. And for the first time, Eleanor realized this situation was no longer political. It had become personal, very personal. By the following evening, England had already decided they were in love, not politely interested. Obsessed. That was the terrifying thing about powerful love stories. People didn't simply watch them, they consumed them. Every ballroom conversation, every newspaper headline, every crowded cafe in London repeated the same question. Did the Duke of Blackthorn truly fall in love with a common woman? The kingdom treated it like entertainment. But for Eleanor Vale, it felt more like walking toward execution dressed in silk. The royal engagement announcement took place beneath the grand cathedral ceiling at Westminster Hall. 1,000 candles illuminated gold arches overhead, while nobles gathered in carefully arranged rows like predators waiting for blood. Eleanor stood beside Lucien at the front of the chamber, wearing a pale ivory gown Mrs. Whitmore had chosen personally. Not extravagant, not royal. Elegant enough to appear dignified. Simple enough to remind the public she was not born noble, which Eleanor suspected was intentional. The king understood symbolism better than anyone alive. "Breathe," Lucien murmured beside her quietly. Easy for him to say. He looked perfectly composed in formal black military dress, silver embroidery glinting beneath candlelight. He belonged in rooms like this. Eleanor still felt like an intruder. "You're shaking," he noted softly. "I'm surrounded by people who want me humiliated. That narrows it down to most of Parliament." To her surprise, she nearly smiled. Lucien glanced down briefly, noticing. And something in his expression softened, dangerously. Before either could speak further, the royal trumpet sounded. Everyone rose immediately. King Aldrich entered slowly, supported by an ebony cane. The entire hall bowed. But Eleanor noticed something shocking instantly. Beatrice had been right. The king looked ill, not weak physically, worse. Tired in the way terminally exhausted people became near the end of long battles. His skin carried a grayness beneath candlelight now, and though his gaze remained razor-sharp, there was death inside his eyes. A horrifying awareness settled over Eleanor. This man wasn't arranging a marriage for amusement. He was trying to secure England before he died. The king reached the throne platform and addressed the court. "Today," he announced calmly, "we formalize an alliance that serves both crown and kingdom." Every noble listened carefully. "The Duke of Blackthorn has accepted engagement to Lady Eleanor Vale." Silence spread first, then whispers exploded. Not shock this time, calculation. Political minds instantly rearranging themselves around new power. The king extended a document toward Lucien. "Step forward." Lucien obeyed. Then came the moment Eleanor dreaded most. Lady Eleanor Vale. She forced herself forward beside him. The king studied them both carefully before speaking quieter now, almost privately. "England survives because someone must occasionally choose duty over comfort." Then his eyes shifted toward Lucien specifically. "Do not fail her." A strange silence followed that statement, because it sounded less like an order and more like warning. Lucien accepted the royal decree. The engagement became official. And just like that, Eleanor's old life vanished forever. The moment the ceremony ended, aristocracy transformed into wolves. Nobles surged toward them instantly, smiles everywhere, false warmth, predatory curiosity. "Lady Eleanor, how enchanting. When did the romance begin? Did his grace court you privately? You must tell us everything." Eleanor suddenly understood why royal women looked exhausted all the time. This wasn't conversation, it was invasion. A tall duchess leaned close enough for Eleanor to smell expensive perfume. "My dear," she whispered sweetly, "you've accomplished every ambitious woman's dream." Eleanor answered calmly, "No, I've become England's newest public target." The duchess blinked, then laughed unexpectedly. "Well," she admitted, "perhaps you'll survive after all." Lucien appeared beside Eleanor almost instantly, protective, silent, possessive enough that nearby nobles stepped back automatically, and Eleanor noticed something disturbing. People feared him more now, not less, because powerful men became most dangerous when emotionally attached. Everyone in the room understood that, including the king. Hours later, Blackthorn Manor overflowed with chaos. Servants carried flowers through endless corridors. Tailors arrived for wedding fittings. Politicians requested private meetings. Newspapers begged for statements. Outside the estate gates, crowds gathered simply hoping to glimpse Eleanor. One engagement announcement had transformed her into national fascination overnight. It reminded Eleanor uncomfortably of modern celebrity culture. People always became addicted to watching women rise publicly, especially when secretly waiting to watch them fall. "You need security now," Lucien said while reviewing letters in the study. Eleanor stared at him. "Security? The attack yesterday changes things." She still couldn't stop thinking about that. Someone had prepared to intercept her carriage. Someone had expected her to run. Who would do that? She asked quietly. Lucien's expression darkened. I have theories. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. A knock interrupted them. Then Captain Holloway entered, former military, scar across his jaw, eyes sharp enough to spot lies instantly. Your Grace, Lucien looked up. Report. The captain placed documents across the desk. We found the men responsible for the bridge ambush. Eleanor's pulse tightened. And they're dead. Silence. What? She whispered. Holloway continued carefully. Executed before we reached them. Lucien's jaw hardened immediately. Someone was cleaning evidence. Professional, fast, powerful. Any identification? Lucien asked. One witness claimed they worked for a noble household. Which household? The captain hesitated. Then finally, House Valmont. Eleanor frowned slightly. Lucien went completely still. And suddenly she understood this mattered. A lot. Who is House Valmont? She asked quietly. Lucien's voice lowered dangerously. The family trying to claim the throne after the king dies. Cold flooded her chest. Oh God, this wasn't merely scandal anymore. This was succession warfare, the captain continued. Lord Valmont's supporters believe your Grace will control Parliament through military influence once married. Lucien looked disgusted. They think Eleanor strengthens public support. Correct. Eleanor sat slowly. People were trying to kill her over public opinion, over symbolism, over political perception. She suddenly remembered something her father once told her as a child. The moment powerful people fear losing control, ordinary morality disappears. At the time, she hadn't understood. Now she did. Perfectly. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep again. Blackthorn Manor felt different now. Too large, too quiet, too dangerous. She wandered downstairs near midnight, wrapped in a dark shawl, intending only to calm her thoughts. Instead, she heard piano music, soft haunting, coming from the west drawing room. Curious, Eleanor moved quietly toward the sound, then stopped at the doorway. Lucien sat alone at the grand piano beneath low candlelight, playing beautifully, not polished performance. Something rawer, sad enough to hurt. Eleanor had never seen this version of him before. Not the Duke, not the political weapon. Just a tired man sitting alone in darkness, trying not to drown in whatever haunted him. She should have left. Instead, she stepped forward, accidentally creaking the floorboard. Lucien stopped immediately. Neither spoke for a moment. Then, I didn't know you played, she said softly. There are many things you don't know about me. The honesty in that answer unsettled her. Eleanor moved farther into the room. You should sleep, so should you. I'm trying. His eyes lifted toward her fully now. And in candlelight, Lucien Ashcombe looked devastatingly human. Not untouchable, not cold, lonely. That realization frightened her more than his power ever had, because lonely men loved recklessly once they finally allowed themselves to feel. You asked earlier who would want you harmed, he said quietly. Eleanor nodded slowly. Lucien's fingers rested motionless against piano keys now. My father, the words stunned her. What? He arranged my mother's death. Silence crashed through the room. Eleanor stared at him in horror. Lucien continued calmly. Too calmly. The official story claimed illness, but she intended to leave him. He couldn't allow public humiliation. Eleanor's stomach turned. He killed her? Yes. How do you know? Because I watched it happen. God. The room suddenly felt smaller. Lucien leaned back slowly, eyes distant now. I was 13. Old enough to understand why screaming stopped suddenly. Eleanor couldn't breathe properly. My father taught me something valuable that night, Lucien continued softly. That power without love becomes cruelty? No. His gaze met hers directly. That men who love possessively become monsters. The sentence settled heavily between them. And suddenly Eleanor understood why he resisted this engagement. Why he kept emotional distance. Why he looked terrified every time he looked at her too long. He feared becoming his father. The realization broke something inside her. You are nothing like him, she whispered. Lucien laughed quietly. Not amused, painfully unconvinced. You don't know that. Yes, I do. You've known me 1 year. I've watched how servants behave around you. That made him pause. Cruel men create fearful silence, Eleanor continued carefully. Your staff loves you. Something vulnerable flickered briefly across his face, then vanished. You should not trust me so easily. I don't. Good. But neither looked away, and the tension between them became unbearable suddenly. Real, dangerously real. Lucien stood slowly. The air changed immediately. Eleanor felt it instantly. That impossible awareness between a man and woman standing too close in the middle of the night while pretending emotions aren't happening. You should go upstairs, he said quietly. Yes, neither moved. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Lucien's gaze dropped briefly toward her mouth before lifting again. Tiny movement. But Eleanor noticed, and once a woman noticed something like that, there was no returning to ignorance. A knock shattered the moment violently. All warmth disappeared instantly. Captain Holloway entered without ceremony. "Your Grace." One look at the captain's face changed everything. "What happened?" Lucien asked immediately. Holloway hesitated, then placed a sealed letter onto the piano. "We found this hidden inside the East servant quarters." Lucien opened it, read once. Then his entire expression darkened into something lethal. Eleanor's pulse spiked. "What is it?" Lucien handed her the letter silently. Her hands trembled as she read. "She does not belong in your world. The next attack will not miss." Below the message, one symbol had been drawn in dark ink. A crest, House Blackthorn's crest.
Do you notice something tragic about men like Lucien? The world praises them for being cold, disciplined, untouchable. But the moment they finally love someone deeply, everyone suddenly calls that love a weakness. And honestly, that still happens today. Powerful people are allowed ambition, anger, even cruelty, but genuine love that terrifies society more than anything. So before we continue, tell me honestly in the comments, do you think love makes a person weaker or finally human?
Eleanor looked up slowly, horrified. Someone inside the manor had betrayed them. The first betrayal always cuts deepest when it comes from inside the house. Eleanor learned that before sunrise. Blackthorn Manor no longer felt like a home. It felt like a beautifully decorated battlefield. Every servant suddenly became suspicious. Every glance lingered too long. Every whisper stopped the moment she entered a room. And somewhere inside those endless halls, someone wanted her dead. Lucien turned the manor upside down before dawn. Guards searched servant quarters. Hallways filled with armed men. Captain Holloway interrogated staff one by one while rain continued hammering the estate windows, like the heavens themselves disapproved of everything happening under that roof. Eleanor stood near the library fireplace, unable to settle her thoughts. The threatening letter still burned inside her mind. The next attack will not miss, not might, will. Whoever wrote it sounded confident, certain, which frightened her more than hatred ever could. Mrs. Whitmore entered quietly carrying tea. "You should eat something." "I'm not hungry." No woman facing aristocracy is ever hungry. Eleanor almost smiled at that. Almost. The older woman sat beside her carefully. "I watched 3 duchesses survive this house before you arrived," Mrs. Whitmore said. "Did any of them survive happily?" A pause. "No, not comforting, but honest." And Eleanor appreciated honesty more than reassurance these days. "Why are people like this?" she asked quietly. "Why does power make everyone cruel, Mrs.?" Whitmore considered carefully before answering. "It doesn't." Eleanor looked toward her. "Fear does." That answer settled deeply, because it was true. People destroyed others when terrified of losing control. It happened in kingdoms, corporations, politics, families. Even modern public life worked the same way. One rumor online, one scandal, one emotional narrative, and suddenly millions of strangers felt entitled to tear someone apart. Human beings had always enjoyed public destruction. Technology merely made it faster. By midday, Lucien finally emerged from the West Wing looking exhausted and furious. His coat remained unbuttoned, dark hair slightly disordered. For the first time since Eleanor met him, he looked genuinely close to losing control. "Anything?" she asked carefully. "Yes." The single word carried ice. Captain Holloway followed behind him holding documents. Lucien crossed directly toward the desk. One servant disappeared before sunrise. Eleanor's stomach tightened. "Who?" "A junior footman named Ellis." Captain Holloway laid a ledger down. He entered the east corridor shortly before midnight and never returned to quarters. Lucien's jaw hardened. He was paid. Eleanor blinked. "Paid by who?" Silence. Then Lucien answered quietly, "Beatrice." The room went still. "No," Eleanor whispered immediately. Because despite everything, she didn't believe it. Lady Beatrice was manipulative, sharp-tongued, proud. But murder? No. Lucien noticed her reaction instantly. "You disagree." "She warned me to run. That proves nothing." "She cared about you." His expression darkened slightly. "That does not make her harmless." Before Eleanor could respond, another servant rushed into the room, pale with panic. "Your Grace, the carriage is ready." Lucien frowned. "What carriage?" "The royal invitation, sir." Everyone froze. "What invitation?" Eleanor asked slowly. Captain Holloway swore under his breath. Then Lucien snatched the sealed letter from the servant's trembling hand. He read it once, and Eleanor watched something dangerous settle behind his eyes. "What is it?" Lucien handed her the invitation. Tonight, the royal court would host a formal banquet honoring the engagement. Hosted publicly, attended by Parliament, foreign dignitaries, every influential family in England. At the bottom of the page, one sentence had been written personally by the king. "Bring Lady Eleanor. England must see her." Eleanor felt sick instantly. This wasn't celebration. It was exposure, public display. The king was forcing England to accept her by placing her directly before them, or he was offering her to wolves to see whether she survived. Lucien made the decision immediately. We are not going. The servant looked horrified. Your Grace, refusal would insult the crown. I'm aware. Eleanor looked up sharply. You'd risk that? Yes. Lucien? No. His voice cut through the room with frightening certainty. You are already being hunted. I will not parade you through a hall full of political enemies. The words hit harder than expected, not because they sounded protective, because they sounded personal, deeply personal. Captain Holloway stepped closer. With respect, Your Grace, absence may worsen public suspicion. Lucien looked ready to dismiss him, but Eleanor interrupted softly. We have to go. Both men turned toward her immediately. No, Lucien said flatly. Yes, absolutely not. If we hide now, they win. His eyes flashed. This is not a debate. And there it was. The Duke, the ruler, the man accustomed to obedience. Something inside Eleanor hardened instantly. Then stop speaking to me like property. Silence exploded through the room. Captain Holloway wisely stepped backward. Even Mrs. Whitmore stopped moving. Lucien stared at Eleanor for several long seconds. Then quieter. That is not what this is. Isn't it you are in danger, and you think controlling me fixes that? His jaw tightened sharply. No. I think keeping you alive matters more than your pride. The honesty stunned both of them. Eleanor's anger faltered slightly. Because he meant it. God help her. He truly meant it. She stepped closer slowly. You cannot protect me from humiliation, no, or rumors, no, or aristocrats who hate me, no. Then let me survive it myself. Long silence. Lucien looked at her the way men looked at storms they knew they couldn't stop. Then finally, fine. Relief flooded her. Until he added coldly, but you do not leave my side tonight. The royal banquet became the most talked-about social event in England before it even began. Crowds gathered outside the palace gates, hoping for glimpses of arriving nobility. Newspapers printed sketches of Eleanor's rumored gown. Women debated whether the future Duchess of Blackthorn would embarrass herself publicly. Men debated whether Lucien Ashcombe had finally fallen in love. And somewhere beneath all that fascination, people waited eagerly for disaster. Because public audiences always loved watching women tested, especially women rising too quickly. When Eleanor descended the Blackthorn staircase that evening, Lucien forgot how to breathe for a moment. She wore dark silver silk, simple neckline, minimal jewels, hair pinned elegantly away from her face. Not dressed like royalty, dressed like dignity, and somehow that made her devastating. The entire entrance hall went silent. Even servants stared. Eleanor noticed Lucien watching her. What? He looked away immediately. Nothing, a lie, a terrible lie. Mrs. Whitmore nearly smiled behind them. Yes, the older woman murmured dryly. He certainly looks unaffected. Lucien shot her a warning glance. Mrs. Whitmore ignored it completely. You both should leave before Parliament collapses from tension. The palace ballroom glittered like war disguised as beauty. Music drifted beneath chandeliers while nobles circled each other carefully through conversation and manipulation. And the moment Eleanor entered bedyed Lucien. The room reacted. Every gaze turned instantly. Whispers spread like fire. She felt them assessing her, measuring, judging, not merely her beauty, her worth. Lucien's hand rested lightly against her back as they walked. Subtle, protective, possessive enough that no one approached immediately. Then came the voice Eleanor least wanted to hear. Well, Lady Beatrice drawled from nearby. England finally has its scandal queen. Eleanor turned. Beatrice looked breathtaking in black velvet and diamonds sharp enough to wound. But tonight something seemed different. Not cruel, exactly. Sad. You look beautiful, Beatrice admitted honestly. Eleanor blinked slightly. Thank you. Don't sound shocked. I only destroy people when deserved. Lucien exhaled tiredly beside them. Must tonight become a battlefield? Beatrice sipped champagne calmly. My dear Lucien, tonight is a battlefield. Then her expression shifted subtly. Toward concern, you should leave. Lucien immediately noticed. Why? Before Beatrice could answer, a voice echoed through the ballroom. Lady Eleanor Vale. The crowd parted. Lord Adrian Valemont approached slowly, tall, handsome, smiling the way snakes probably would if given human faces. And instantly Eleanor understood danger. Political danger. Valemont bowed politely. A pleasure at last. Lucien's entire posture hardened beside her. Valemont Blackthorn. No warmth existed between those two names. Only rivalry sharp enough to bleed. Valemont looked toward Eleanor again. You've become remarkably famous. She did not ask for that, Lucien replied coldly. Valemont smiled. No woman ever asks to become powerful. It simply terrifies men when they do. Interesting answer. Too intelligent to dismiss casually. Then Valemont leaned slightly closer toward Eleanor. And yet, he continued softly, I wonder whether you understand what the king truly made you. Eleanor held his gaze carefully. What exactly is that? His smile widened. Bait. Before she could react, a servant suddenly stumbled through the ballroom doors shouting. Everyone turned sharply. The servant looked terrified. Fire. Chaos exploded instantly. Smoke poured from the eastern gallery corridor. Women screamed. Nobles surged backward. Guards rushed toward flames. And through the confusion, Eleanor saw something horrifying. A masked man moving directly toward her through the crowd, knife hidden beneath formal coat, fast, purposeful, coming straight for her. Everything happened at once. Lucien saw him too. Eleanor, the masked attacker, lunged, then Lucien lost control. Completely. The Duke moved with terrifying speed, shoving Eleanor behind him before slamming the attacker violently into a marble column. The ballroom erupted into panic. The knife clattered across the floor. But Lucien didn't stop. Years of controlled rage exploded all at once. One punch, another, another. The attacker collapsed, choking blood while guards rushed forward. And still Lucien looked ready to kill him barehanded. "Your Grace!" Captain Holloway shouted. Nothing. Lucien grabbed the man again with murderous fury burning openly across his face now. And Eleanor realized something terrifying. This was the first time anyone in England had seen the Duke of Blackthorn emotionally shattered publicly. Not cold, not composed. Furious. Because someone tried hurting her. Lucien. Her voice cut through the chaos. He froze instantly. Breathing hard, hands bloodied, eyes wild enough that nearby nobles actually stepped backward in fear. Then slowly, painfully slowly, he turned toward her, and the expression on his face in that moment changed everything between them. Because it wasn't rage anymore. It was terror. Real terror. The kind a man feels after nearly losing the person he loves. The ballroom saw it too. Every noble, every politician, every enemy. And suddenly, England no longer questioned whether the Duke loved Eleanor Vale. Now they feared what he might become because of it. Later that night, after the palace emptied and the attacker was dragged away in chains, the king summoned Eleanor privately. She entered the royal study alone. King Aldrich stood near the window, looking older than ever. "Tired evening?" he asked quietly. Eleanor stared at him. "You knew this would happen." The king didn't deny it. "I suspected. You used me as bait." Silence. The honesty stunned her. Anger rose instantly. "People nearly died." "No," the king corrected softly. "Only guilty men panicked." Eleanor looked sickened. "You gamble with human lives." The king turned toward her slowly now. "My dear, ruling is gambling with human lives every day." Cold truth. Terrible truth. Then his expression shifted slightly. "You wish to know why I chose you?" "Yes." The king stepped closer carefully. "Because Lucien Ashcombe would burn England to save you." Her breath caught. "And men capable of that kind of love," Aldrich continued quietly, "are the only men I trust with power." Eleanor stared at him speechless. The king looked exhausted suddenly. "Ancient. I am dying," he admitted softly. "And England is about to become dangerous." Then came the final revelation. "I did not force this marriage to save the kingdom." His gaze held hers steadily. "I forced it because without you, Lucien eventually becomes his father." Silence. Absolute silence. And for the first time, Eleanor truly understood the terrifying weight of what she meant to the Duke of Blackthorn. 3 days after the attack at the palace, the king collapsed during council. England panicked instantly. Church bells rang across London before sunrise. Royal physicians flooded the palace. Newspapers printed emergency editions by noon. And by evening, rumors spread faster than truth. The king is dying. Parliament is dividing. Lord Valemont prepares to seize control. Blackthorn may challenge the succession. Fear consumed the kingdom. Because people could survive poverty, they could survive war. But uncertainty turned civilized societies savage frighteningly fast. Banks began restricting withdrawals. Merchants hoarded goods. Aristocrats formed secret alliances overnight, and outside Blackthorn Manor, angry crowds gathered demanding answers from the Duke. Not because they trusted him. Because terrified people always searched desperately for someone strong enough to follow. Inside the manor, the atmosphere felt suffocating. Servants whispered constantly. Guards doubled around the estate, and Lucien barely slept anymore. Eleanor noticed it immediately. The exhaustion beneath his eyes. The tension in his shoulders. The dangerous silence growing inside him. He spent hours locked inside the study with military advisors and political leaders while England slowly unraveled beyond the gates. By the 4th night, Eleanor finally reached her limit. She entered the study without knocking. Lucien looked up from scattered documents instantly. "You should be asleep, so should you." Neither smiled. A storm raged outside again. It felt like storms followed them now. Captain Holloway stood nearby reviewing maps before quietly excusing himself from the room, wisely sensing what was coming. The moment the door closed, Eleanor stepped closer. "You cannot keep carrying this alone." Lucien leaned back tiredly. "Yes, I can. No, you're simply accustomed to suffering privately." That hit. She saw it in his face immediately. Years of emotional isolation wrapped in discipline. The kind powerful men inherited young because vulnerability was treated like weakness. "My entire life," Eleanor continued softly, People told me surviving meant never needing anyone. Lucien watched her carefully now. But surviving and living are different things. Silence. Then quietly, you make this difficult. Her pulse quickened slightly. What? This. He stood slowly. This distance. The air changed immediately. Again. That unbearable tension, neither of them knew how to survive anymore. Lucien moved closer carefully, like approaching something capable of saving or destroying him equally. I spent years controlling every part of myself, he admitted quietly. Because men like my father destroy what they love. You are not your father. You keep saying that because it's true. His jaw tightened. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Long silence. Then finally, when my mother died, he said quietly, I promised myself I would never love anyone enough to become weak. Eleanor's chest hurt hearing that. And then, his eyes held hers fully now. And then you arrived. God. No performance, no rehearsed romance, just devastating honesty. The kind people rarely heard anymore because modern love had become buried beneath games, ego, fear, and emotional pretending. Lucien looked almost angry admitting it, as if the universe decided humiliating me personally would be entertaining. Despite everything, Eleanor laughed softly, and for the first time in days, Lucien smiled, a real smile. Small, tired, beautiful enough to ruin her completely. Then someone knocked violently downstairs. The moment shattered instantly. Captain Holloway burst back into the study moments later. Your Grace. One look at his face changed everything. What happened? We found the traitor. The entire household assembled in the grand hall within minutes. Servants lined the walls nervously, while guards stood armed beside every entrance. Rain thundered against stained glass windows overhead. Eleanor stood beside Lucia near the staircase, heart pounding. Then Captain Holloway entered, dragging a man forward in chains. The moment Eleanor recognized him, shock hit like ice water. Ellis? The missing footman looked pale and terrified, barely older than 20. This is impossible, Eleanor whispered. Lucian's expression remained cold. Search his belongings. Captain Holloway placed several letters onto the table, payment records, meeting schedules, political instructions. And finally, one final document bearing House Vailmont's seal. The room erupted into horrified whispers. Ellis broke instantly. I didn't mean for anyone to die. Lucien descended the staircase slowly, terrifyingly calm. Then explain. The young servant trembled violently. They said it would only frighten her away. Who said Valmont's men? Tears streamed down Ellis's face now. They promised money for my family. My mother's sick. Lucian's voice cut sharply through the hall. So you sold information about this house. I'm sorry. People nearly died. Ellis collapsed to his knees, sobbing. And suddenly Eleanor saw the ugly truth beneath all political corruption. Desperate people became useful weapons for powerful men. Just like in every era, governments, corporations, internet outrage, public manipulation, fear and desperation always made betrayal affordable. Then Ellis whispered something that changed everything. There's more. Lucien went still. What? The servant looked toward Eleanor. Your father. Her blood froze instantly. What about my father? Ellis swallowed hard. Valmont's father ordered his death. The world stopped. Eleanor couldn't breathe. Lucien turned sharply. Explain. General Vale discovered illegal military contracts years ago, Ellis stammered. Weapons sold to enemies. Soldiers abandoned for profit. Eleanor felt sick. My father exposed corruption. Yes, and they killed him for it. Ellis nodded through tears. Silence crashed through the manor. Every servant understood the weight of that revelation instantly. Eleanor suddenly remembered her father coming home exhausted near the end. The arguments, the fear in his eyes. The way he kissed her forehead longer than usual the final night she saw him alive. Oh God. He knew they would kill him. Her knees nearly gave out. Lucien caught her immediately before she fell, strong arms steadying her against him, and for the first time since childhood, Eleanor cried, not elegant tears, real grief. The kind buried so deeply it poisoned people slowly over years. Lucien held her silently while the hall remained completely still. No one dared move, because witnessing genuine heartbreak always made humans uncomfortable, especially powerful people unused to truth. By morning, London exploded into chaos again. Lord Vailmont's corruption became public. Parliament fractured instantly. Half demanded arrest. Others demanded succession control before civil unrest spread further. And then came the final disaster. The king summoned Lucien privately, alone. When Lucien returned hours later, Eleanor immediately knew something was wrong. He looked empty, not angry, not cold, empty. What happened? Lucien removed his gloves slowly. The king is dying tonight. The words hollowed the room instantly. Eleanor stepped closer carefully. And long silence. Then he offered me the throne. Her heart stopped. What? The royal bloodline weakens after Aldrich dies. Parliament trusts me. The military trusts me. Lucien looked disgusted saying it. He believes I can prevent civil war. Eleanor stared at him speechless. You could become king. Yes. The room went silent. Then came the worst part. But Parliament will never accept you beside me. Cold spread through her chest. Lucian's eyes darkened painfully. They believe England requires a politically strategic queen, meaning noble, connected, approved, not Eleanor, never Eleanor. So what happens now, she whispered. Lucien looked at her for a long moment, and Eleanor realized he looked truly tortured for the first time. Not frightened, not furious, broken. Because for the first time in his life, power demanded he sacrifice the one thing he actually loved. The irony was almost cruel enough to laugh at. A lifetime of wealth, influence, titles, and none of it mattered compared to one woman standing quietly in front of him. The council expects my answer before dawn, he said quietly. Eleanor forced herself to breathe steadily. Then you should accept. Lucian's expression changed instantly. No. Yes, I said no. I would rather watch the monarchy collapse. The raw honesty stunned her. You don't mean that. I absolutely do. He stepped toward her now, intensity radiating from him dangerously. My entire life has been duty, responsibility, sacrifice. His voice lowered. And for once, just once, I want something for myself. Eleanor's chest physically hurt hearing that, because millions of people understood that feeling. The exhaustion of always being practical, always surviving, always choosing what made sense instead of what made them happy. Modern audiences related to stories like this because real life demanded emotional compromise constantly. People stayed in loveless relationships for stability, worked jobs they hated for survival, pretended not to care because vulnerability felt unsafe. Lucian's pain felt real because it was real. I cannot become the reason England burns, Eleanor whispered. You're the only reason I would save it. Silence. Then suddenly, the palace bells rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Every face in the manor changed instantly. Mrs. Whitmore slowly closed her eyes. The king, she whispered. Gone. England entered mourning by sunrise, black cloth draped across London. Churches filled with grieving crowds. And behind palace walls, power moved like knives in darkness. Parliament demanded Lucien accept emergency coronation. The military prepared for unrest. Lord Valmont's remaining supporters threatened rebellion. Everything balanced on one decision: the throne, or Eleanor. That evening, Lucien stood before Parliament inside the royal chamber. Hundreds watched silently. Politicians, military leaders, nobility, the future of England waiting on his answer. Eleanor remained hidden behind the upper gallery, unable to breathe properly. The Prime Minister stepped forward. Your Grace, he announced formally, England requests your acceptance of the crown. Silence filled the chamber. Lucien looked across the room slowly, then finally spoke. No, shock exploded instantly. The Prime Minister stared. No, I will not become king. Chaos erupted through Parliament, arguments, shouting, disbelief. And through all of it, Lucien remained calm. One politician rose furiously. You would abandon England for a woman? Lucien's answer became legend. If England requires a man to betray the person he loves in order to save it. His eyes hardened. Then perhaps England deserves to collapse. Silence crashed through the chamber. Every person present understood history had just changed. Lucien removed the royal signet ring placed before him. I have watched powerful men destroy themselves chasing crowns, then quietly, I will not become one of them. He turned and walked away from the throne, from power, from history itself, for her. Weeks later, England slowly stabilized beneath parliamentary rule. Lord Valmont was arrested. Corruption trials began. The monarchy weakened permanently. But civil war never came. And strangely, the public loved Lucien more for refusing the crown. Because ordinary people trusted sacrifice more than ambition, especially sacrifice for love. The wedding took place quietly near winter. No massive royal spectacle, no political performance, only candlelight. Snow falling softly outside the chapel windows. Mrs. Whitmore crying discreetly in the front row. Captain Holloway pretending not to. And Lucien standing at the altar looking at Eleanor like she had rebuilt something inside him he thought died years ago. When the vows ended, he kissed her gently, not dramatically, not performatively, real, the kind of kiss that felt earned. And for the first time in a very long time, both of them looked at peace. Years later, people still told the story across England. Not about the king, or parliament, or political scandal. They remembered the duke who walked away from a throne because the woman he loved mattered more. And strangely enough, that decision saved him from becoming the very thing he feared most, his father. If this story moved you even a little, follow for more deeply human historical drama stories where love, power, betrayal, and sacrifice collide. And tell me in the comments, would you choose love over power, Evid Threven, if the entire world called you a fool?
Stories like this stay with people because deep down, almost everyone has faced the same impossible choice in some form: power, or peace, survival, or love, becoming who the world wants, or protecting the one person who makes you feel alive. Lucien walked away from a throne because he understood something most powerful people never do. If success costs your soul, then it was never victory to begin with. If this story moved you even a little, subscribe for more deeply emotional historical dramas. And tell me below, would you have made the same choice he did?